Hey, fellow babies, welcome back to Pachter Factor on SIFTD.net. I'm hopeful you're watching on SIFTD and you're supporting SIFTD through Patreon. If you are, thank you very much. Shane at Dinfire on Twitter, thanks you very much. If you're not watching on Patreon or on SIFTD, then you have to follow me on Twitter at Michael Pachter, because if you're getting this for free, the least you can do is put up with my BS on Twitter. So appreciate if I get a follow at Michael Pachter. Welcome back to the Pachter Factor. Our first question comes from SIFTD from Thomas Yarbrough. Hey, Pac, I love the show. Thank you very much, Thomas Yarbrough. I know you don't follow Japanese publishers very closely, but do you know why they don't sell as many games as in the US, as they did back in the 90s? Is there a way for them to regain this market share? Is the drop due to rise of first-person shooters, or is there another factor I'm missing? The truth is that back in the day, the console manufacturers were Japanese. So, Nintendo and Sony dominated through 2001. So we didn't have a U.S. console manufacturer. The third-party suppliers for PlayStation and Nintendo were some U.S. companies, EA, Activision, and we had, a lot of, and Sega, remember Sega? So Sega was the other Japanese console maker. So you had, Madden and FIFA and NHL and Crash Bandicoot coming from the U.S. But, Sega dominated its platform and Nintendo dominated its platform, and to some extent, Sony did a really great job of kind of ramping up all the Capcoms and Namco Bandais and Square Enix of the world. And Square and Enix were different companies, and Namco and Bandai were different companies back then. So tons and tons of Japanese support for Japanese consoles, which totally makes sense. Good relationships for the Japanese manufacturers with the Japanese publishers. The U.S. publishers were not as big as the Japanese publishers back in the 90s, and they grew. And we had consolidation in the U.S., and we had kind of the invention of multiplayer, and I would say, multiplayer was, who knows, it was probably invented by the geeks, the nerds in their, garages who played Counter-Strike, who invented and played Counter-Strike. But it kind of evolved on the Xbox, and the Xbox was built to be a multiplayer console. It was internet connection. And Halo was big, and then Call of Duty took it to the next level, and then FIFA Ultimate Team took it to yet another level. And, we've just got big stakes in multiplayer gaming from Western publishers, and that has dominated. In the meantime, I don't think that the Japanese publishers did a very good job of keeping up. You had, stuff like Konami getting into a fight with Kojima. Like, where did that come from? I don't know. But Kojima has still never made a really great multiplayer game, right? So eventually, I'm sure he will. He's capable. But Japanese games tended to stay as single-player games, and Western games tended to become multiplayer games. And in the last 5 years, the U.S. publishers figured out that, wow, if we get you playing multiplayer, we can keep you going with microtransactions, and we can just sell you more and more and more stuff. I know how much gamers hate that, but they do stay engaged. So games like Overwatch, games like Grand Theft Auto Online, where you just continue to stay in and spend money. And obviously, if you're in and you're spending money, you feel like it's money well spent. So the Japanese publishers have not figured that out. So they've really gotten crushed in terms of percentage share, because they're largely, makers of single-player games, and that's just not quite as popular as it's been in the past. And I think that's part of the whole rationale behind, shutting down Visceral Studios at EA, that they were primarily a single-player, game maker. And I think the trend is moving to multiplayer, moving to microtransactions. And when the Japanese figure it out, to be honest with you, they're great. They make great content. But frankly, Nintendo's barely figured it out. I mean, what's a big multiplayer game? Mario Kart, and maybe Splatoon now. But Zelda's not a multiplayer game. Mario Odyssey's not a multiplayer game. They can be, and maybe they will be, but they're just not there yet. So I think that the migration to multiplayer is what really got more and more gamers engaged. And I think that ignoring multiplayer both by by the console maker Nintendo and by the publishers who supported Sony and Nintendo, really kind of did them in. So they become far, far less important. You're right, and I think that's the reason. Next question from SIFTD from Norix Nessie. I am curious about advertising in the gaming industry. Has YouTube and social media made the cost of advertising go up or down? Do you have to spend more on advertising for games that don't come out every year, like Call of Duty and Madden? How can publishers save money on reaching more people? Actually, YouTube and social media have made the cost of advertising go down. Mobile games is the only place where the cost of advertising is going up a lot. So user installs are really expensive, because the place where you attract installs in the West is in a game, when it boots up or whatever. And it's really gotten expensive to advertise for installs. And that's not because of social media, that's because of the wild success of games like Clash of Clans and Mobile Strike and Game of War, where those guys are each doing $1 billion of revenue a year, and they're spending hundreds of millions, literally probably 200 million each, in trying to get user installs. So they're bidding up the cost of installs, but that has nothing to do with the console guys. On the console guys, no, the advertising tends to be mostly television, some print billboard, and then the balance internet. And internet advertising in general isn't actually that expensive. Targeted advertising is expensive. So social media, if you go to Facebook and say, I want to reach a 19 to 24-year-old guy who's likely to play Call of Duty, they're going to get you a super high hit rate. Way over 50% of the people who see the ad are going to be that person. If you go to Snapchat, well, first of all, there aren't that many 19 to 24-year-old guys on there, but they're not. They in Twitter, they don't know who you are. I mean, Twitter knows who I follow. They don't know who I am. So it's really hard to deliver that kind of ad. So actually, if you look at Twitter and Snapchat results, they will tell you that the price paid by advertisers has gone down by a lot, like literally 40% or so year over year. So the rates that they're charging are down. So it's really easy to advertise on those sites. Where console game makers tend to advertise is, sites like IGN, probably sites like SIFTD. Do you have advertising?
We don't have ads.
Oh, there you go.
We're ad-free.
You should have ads. Yeah, sites where gamers go. It's pretty obvious if you're going to Giant Bomb to read a Call of Duty review, you probably haven't bought Call of Duty. And that's a valuable advertising unit, and they probably do have to pay up for that one. So, it's all over the place, but no, YouTube and social media in general hasn't driven up the cost of advertising. Facebook by itself, yes, because they target so well. But overall, YouTube, social media, all that's really happened is we consumers spend more time being exposed to advertising because of YouTube and social media. And so, think back to before Facebook existed. How could they find you? Print and television, radio. There was no other way to reach a consumer. Now that there's social media, I mean, this for yourself. How many hours a day did you used to spend when it was just television? And how many hours a day do you spend consuming media now when it's TV and social media? The answer is more. So there's more advertising inventory, price has not gone up. So how do publishers save money on reaching more people? Targeted advertising. Like I said, you put it in a Giant Bomb, review of Call of Duty. That's a good place to advertise Call of Duty. But the truth is, the publishers, on average, spend between 12 and 14% of revenue on advertising, and that isn't a mistake. That's by design. So they budget that much. And so if they think the game is going to sell $100 million, just a nice easy number, they budget $12 million in advertising. If the game ends up spending 150, they actually will jack up the advertising to 18 because they want to chase that last 50. So they'll spend another 6 million to drive the other 50 million in sales. So when a game is successful, and you see this with movie advertising as well, when there's a movie like Get Out that comes out that was not expected to be a big hit and was a pretty big hit, the advertising kept going. Baby Driver, the advertising kept going because the movies were in the theaters for 5 or 6 weeks instead of 2, and people heard about it word of mouth, but you actually heard about it because you saw ads on TV. So same with games. If they sell well, if they're surprised and they sell well, the publishers chase them and they tend to advertise more and more and more. From SIFTD, our next question from Yakov V. Hey, Pac, why has Sony abandoned disc-based and later digital backwards compatibility for the first PlayStation? In the past, it was such a big selling point for PS2, PS3, and Vita. What's changed? Why has Microsoft embraced it so much with Xbox One? I honestly don't know the answer. I can only surmise it's technological. That's nothing more than that. It's probably a function of architecture of PS1 games and PS4 games, and it might be just, again, you guys, none of you are old enough to remember this, but I remember back in the days of an 8087, 8088 processor, and then a x86, 286, 386, 486 Pentium. So processors kept getting faster, and we pretty much got new PCs back then like every year because they were moving that fast. And I remember taking a disc that I had for a game or for not software, but not productivity software, but typically games, and you would put it in and it would run so fast it was blinding, you couldn't see it. I think that's probably what's going on between PS1 and now. PS1 I think was 32-bit architecture. Actually, I know it was, because if you think about the N64, the N64 was 64-bit. It came out to crap all over the PS1. The PS1 came out at 32-bit, and Nintendo was like, we can outbit you, 64. So really had twice as much, had twice as many pixels per cycle. It was crazy. And I think that's just what it comes down to. And you say Microsoft, the Xbox One was like, you can look this up. I didn't research this question, but I think it was 233 megahertz. It was like super fast clock speed. It was fast. It might have even been faster. It might have been 733, something like that. It was fast. So so the Xbox, original Xbox, was a lot closer to the Xbox One than the original PlayStation is the PS4. I think that's the answer. But finance major, I honestly have no freaking clue. I never took a computer science course in my life. I did something on punch cards when I was a kid. I've never taken an engineering course. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Make a GIF out of that. Our last question this week comes from SIFTD from Skimpy. I love that name. Some games like GTA 5 and The Last of Us sold at the end of a console generation and then sold again at the beginning of the next generation, allowing publishers to sell the games twice. Double bubble. Do you think this is deliberate? Given the success of this approach, do you think the publishers will try and do this deliberately going forward? Well, for GTA 5, 100%, it was deliberate. The game launched in September of 13. The consoles came out in November of 13. And then the big shocker, at E3 in 14, a whopping 10 months after GTA 5 launched on old-gen consoles, they announced it was coming out in November of 14 for next-gen consoles. So look, trust me, the Rockstar guys are not that good. They didn't make that game in 4 months. So they were working on the Xbox One and PS4 versions of that game before the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions launched. And I think what was deliberate was not launching them all at once. I think that they intentionally held back a year, which in retrospect was genius if you're a shareholder of Take-Two. Genius, because for sure they sold the game twice. GTA 5 on old gen, I want to say sold 29 million units the first year. And GTA 5 combined, it sold 85. I gotta think at least half of those 29 million bought it again, because why not? And especially if they want to play GTA Online. So truth is, yes, they did that on purpose. Last of Us, I think that's one of those games that Sony wanted to get it out. They talked about it. I'm not so sure that they did this to sell it to you twice as much as it was just a really good game that they had out right around when the console launched. So no, I don't think they were hoping that you would buy the game twice. your question, given the success of this approach, do you think publishers will try and do this deliberately going forward? No. And the reason is that console cycles are blurring now. You've got the Xbox One X, the most powerful console ever, coming out 4 years after the Xbox One. Is it a new console? Well, no, but kinda. And so I actually think the next iteration is going to be the Xbox, 1.5 XYZ. I mean, they're going to have something that's a little better than this one, and it is sort of a next generation, but not really. And as an earlier question asked, yeah, they'll make it backward compatible and they'll figure it out. But no, I don't think so. I don't think that anybody's going to be able to time cycles the way they did this past cycle, because the Xbox 360 came out in 2005, the Xbox One in 13. It took them 8 years. We're heading into 2018 now. I think you get a next console before 8 years. I think you get one by 2019, maybe 2020, but 2019 probably. And no, I don't think publishers are that good. Frankly, I think that Grand Theft Auto had to start working on it before there was an Xbox One or PS4 announced. They started, I'm sure, working on that game in 2008, and nobody knew when the next consoles are coming out. They probably got the specs for the new consoles in 2011 or 2012, and they started working hard on porting the game over and making it work on the next gen consoles. And the Rockstar guys are perfectionists. They're not going to put out something that doesn't work. So it probably took them that long to get it right. And then they thought, well, gosh, we can't announce that we have a PS4 and Xbox One version launching in 14 because nobody will buy our game in 13. That was smart. They didn't do it to screw you. They did it to make sure that you enjoyed your game, but then they had the opportunity to sell it to you again. And again, I don't think that was ever a strategy. It just turned out in hindsight to be brilliant. The strategy was, don't screw up the launch by announcing that the game you're buying in 2013 is immediately obsolete. And that's what they avoided doing. And that's the right approach, I think. So, look, I think the Take-Two guys or the Rockstar guys managed this perfectly because I don't think they pissed anybody off. What cracks me up is, there's 160 million PS3s and Xbox 360s out there. There's only about, maybe 90 million Xbox Ones and PS4s out there. So there's at least 60 million people, 70 million people who can't buy Grand Theft Auto on next-gen consoles because they don't have one, but they have an old-gen console, at least. I mean, if you assume that the 90 million combined all owned an old-gen console. And so, I think it's great that they have a game that you guys can play. And, eventually you're going to have to buy a next-gen console to play any games. But even this year, FIFA and NBA 2K were both on old-gen consoles. I think it's the last time you're going to see a lot of publisher support for old-gen. But you got it. This is really late. 4 full years into the cycle, still being able to get games on old-gen. And, next year I'd say forget it. So if you want to play console games, you better frickin' get a new console. That's it for this week's Pachter Factor. If you're watching on SIFTD, we appreciate your patronage through Patreon. If you're watching on YouTube, you got to follow me on Twitter, please. I'm dwindling down into nothingness. I'm never going to get to 50,000 followers. At Michael Pachter, it's really easy to spell. And put up with my drivel. I'm not that political, but I'm really, I actually post about the market all the time too, so it's kind of fun. Would appreciate a Twitter follow because I need it. And if you can't afford it, please support Shane and SIFTD on Patreon. It's only a couple bucks a month. You won't notice it. Just, don't get as many tacos. Wait for Vince Zampella to buy you one. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.